what I call the free market, and most the authorities call the black market, always exists. So even if you don't have the phone that has the app that's the only one that can work in a store, somebody in your community might and is willing to go in there and get you something on their app, bring it out, and you give them 2 ounces of silver. I mean, this cannot be stopped. Human nature cannot be crushed. It's been tried many, many times, and there's all kinds of science fiction, dystopian movies about it and novels. Hello, everyone. This is David Morgan of themorganreport.com, and I'm doing a podcast with David DuByne of Adapt 2030. A little bit where I found David. I've been doing a weekly update for the general public for, I don't know how long, at least a year, maybe longer. And I made a consistent 15-minute type of audio, sometimes video, about what's really going on in the financial economy. And I served up like really name brand sources such as Reuters. Occasionally I go off a little bit like Zero Hedge and Wolf Richter and some of these other people. But a lot of them just came straight from like Bloomberg, Reuters, CNBC, and others. And one thing that I started noticing more and more and more was this food problem, and it kept coming up. And I think what happened is all those bots out there in this AI figured out I was saying a lot about food and lack of food and food problems and locusts and everything else. And all of a sudden, Adapt 2030 came, and that's an interesting name. And I listened to David DuByne. I've kind of been hooked ever since because he's a straight shooter. He's got a great head and a great heart. I like to vector off into the precious metals and talk about, can silver buy food? And I go with, I love empirical data that I can say, here's the proof. And I don't remember the gentleman's name. He did a couple podcasts way back in the Argentina failure of the currency, and there's been one since then of 2000. And there was a documentary done by PBS called The Empty ATM. And it was all about when this currency crisis happened in Argentina. And again, I repeat, there's been one since then. But they set up basically flea markets and people would trade. And this guy went on and on, because I'm particularly interested in it, on, is this precious metals that I talk about most of my life really worth it? And the answer is yes. He was able to buy just about anything he wanted with silver. And what he said was very interesting. Now, this applies to Argentina. I'm not trying to make a case study out of this, but actually there it was better for jewelry because it was smaller units, a small silver chain or a silver ring or silver earrings or silver bracelet or that kind of thing. Actually there it worked a little better than just having a silver round or silver ounce. Go take us back into history about, when things get this tough on the food side. Did precious metals always play a part?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're talking about the silver bullion jewelry, and that's sold out across the planet. I was looking into getting some silver bullion jewelry because each individual link can have a different weight depending on what you're looking for. And how easy is that just to snap off a piece, a 10th ounce piece versus a whole silver ounce or a quarter ounce. When we get into this, if it does go to this direction, a whole silver ounce is going to be so valuable that most people won't have change for it. You'll either spend the whole ounce on it, or if we look back in history, beyond the metals, the things that were tradable were things like seeds, so you could produce more food, the trade of animals, the trades of tools. And we start to see this repeating cycle of the things that held value during these changes. And I don't care if it's back in the Homeric minimum, 2500 BC, or if it's now, these things are going to have the same tradable value. Things that can create more food for you, heirloom seeds. Metals have held value for how many thousands of years? They're not going to go away, because I don't care what country you're in, that piece of silver has value in the eyes of somebody who can trade it and then on trade it to something else. It's not going to, I can't use this because I can't get rid of it in another town or city or another, like you talk about flea market. No. There's going to be hundreds of people in that flea market. I want that silver, because they know that it's going to hold value as well. So, all we're doing is marching back through history and see what held value. It's metals, your ability to grow food, the tools to do it, and your security as well.
Very good. I want to vector off again. I keep using that word, but I live north of the Palouse, which is great for wheat growing in Washington State. And I always use this, I don't even say it's corny, but this analogy that these farmers that have these massive acres of wheat, they've got a wheat problem. Even in a food shortage, they've got hundreds and hundreds of acres of wheat. So what's he going to do? Is he going to trade with me for a silver bar and let me fill up my truck and drive it home? Or does he want the latest iPhone or big screen TV? You know darn well he's going to take silver. So does that stir any thoughts on your end?
Well, the only closest thing I could come to it was in Thailand in 2008, where they were having bandits come in the middle of the night. The rice had grown through this full season and it was ready to be harvested. Well, groups of organized crime would come in with combine harvesters and come through fields in the middle of the night. And the food became so valuable that they were trading the food for the armed protection services. So let's say you're a guard that would come in and stand guard. They wouldn't pay you money. They paid you in rice so you could feed your family, because the rice was getting so expensive and unavailable that being a protector of that food source was the value for those people to there. And again, it comes down to armies. Can we have a military to go and force people to give food or grow food for you? As long as those forces are fed and their families are fed, they're going to continue to have allegiance to you. As soon as the food stops and their families are hungry and the soldiers are hungry, their allegiance stops. So for the farmer that can feed their own private security, that farmer that can then get maybe silver to pay their own security forces to protect their fields, it's going to be the way it's going to go. And I really believe there's going to be more regional trading happening, because you saw Warren Buffett, he bought all those railroads. So what does he know about rail transport that we didn't get the memo on? Why would somebody buy 80% of the rail companies, traffic, routes, lines, everything across America, one holder? 80% of all rail traffic held by Buffett now. So why is that? Regional trading, because you can send things by rail. We're sure not going to be international trading as much as we used to, but if you're going to send large, heavy quantities of something like grains, and imagine if it was just like in England in the 1600s, they would have to have military on every single convoy that included food, because it would be so valuable, it definitely gets stopped every time. So who can protect the food is going to be, and who can produce the food are going to become the new gentry and wealth class. Food and metals, that's just recycle. It's a repeat.
Okay. Well, we both named David, so what's your reply to the Davids have gone super doom on us, because it does sound rather bleak, but, people survived. And I mean, people, I go back to the example of the Cubans, but the problem we have is the political class, the elite, are telling us, don't grow your own food, bad, bad, don't eat meat, bad, bad. I mean, they're trying to control us. Do you think that the people at large will say, one big forget you and WTF, and we're doing whatever we need to do?
I think it'll come down to that, really. Because imagine if you and I and our families, and we had a couple neighbors, and we'd set up a grow garden in the back, and let's say it was 3 or 4 acres of just pure food production. We had some goats and chicken. And then the local city government was coming in and say, well, you're violating an ordinance. We're going to have to destroy your garden. I think at that point, we're going to have a few problems. And would it be reported in the media, or would it have to be, the social media picking it up and taking it? Because I don't think they want to show that there's a resistance against your ability to grow food for your families. And I don't think people are going to stand for when their food, their very source of existence and life, is being taken from them by unelected officials or somebody that wants to play the power card,
So you start with 3 pillars. I think we've covered 2. What was the third? My short memory.
The population migration, which is another big one, and the economic collapse, but then the social unrest that always accompanies this. People get very angry when their food is super expensive or the food's unavailable. We in America are so used to having fully stocked stores, nothing ever to want. I mean, you and I growing up, when's the last time you really wanted for anything in this country? If as long as you had the money to buy it, it's always been there. Always. We never even questioned that it wouldn't be there until just these last few months. And it's not. And look how psychologically damaging that is for people. They're like biting their fingernails, like, oh, it's not going to be there. So it's a whole shift in the mentality here. And whoever's engineering this has definitely got their ducks in a row on how they're bending the physical reality of how we are thinking and reacting to the stimulus.
Tell me more. What do you think this is going to go to? I mean, these checks are going to stop, I think, next month. People are already agitated. I personally, been, very lucky, blessed. But I go to a discount food. It's called grocery outlet. I don't know if they're even outside of my state, but they're random. So if you see something on Tuesday and go back a week later, that particular, let's say, power bar that was half the price of a normal food outlet, if you bought 2 cases, and I thought you'd go back and get 2 more the next time. They're gone, man. And they've substituted with something else. So anyway, my point is, one, that availability is not something that's guaranteed anymore. That's point number one. I really want to go back to you. How far do you see the social unrest going? Where do you see it leading, and what do you think the possible outcomes are?
How doomy do you want to go? I see a balkanization of the United States where it's going to break up into different regions eventually here, because this election coming up, no matter what happens, who wins, I don't care. Or what political party wins, the other party, there's going to be a complete non-acceptance of anything. So the political structure is going to break down in the states, and then add up the food shortages that are inbound, because the USDA just revamped all of their corn estimates for the year. But I think they were offsetting from last year's floods, where they didn't really want to spook people with the losses that we encountered. You know, you talked about the silos. Those floods up in Nebraska were the biggest ever in recorded American history. And the amount of planting last year was equal to 1938. Okay, well, we've advanced a lot and there's more people. So when we have planting that's equivalent to 1938 in 2019, that's a huge disconnect. And then they discounted and knocked down 12 million acres, and then they're still trying to couple a few things, but then suddenly they come out with this magic downgrade right now. So I think they just pushed the can down the road here. And how much longer can it really go on? China's really starting to buy now, because Brazil's not, they bought out Brazil, so now they're coming to the US. So there's only so much food available left. And it seems like all of it's being bought or spoken for.
Right.
How long will it take before people really want action because of their food price? They're going to demand action. And you see right now it's becoming more a mob demand than it is a political demand. It is, but the politicians being able to control that to bring it back to the citizens that middle section's gone. It's mob rule now, and the politicians are going to be of no help. It's going to be mob mentality. But again, you go back and start to see the same things again. Why do you think they had moats and tall walls around the fortresses, sieges? You know, I think we're going back to medieval past here. And you know, these pre-programming of the shows too, Game of Thrones, I mean, that was the most popular show for such a long time. The message was there, it's going to get cold. The message was there, you're going to live like paupers and the serfs again. And if the political system breaks down, the monetary system breaks down, if you don't have access to precious metals and something tradable, you are going to be living like those people in the mud in the Game of Thrones. And you know, there's so much predictive programming being put out to us right now. You see it everywhere in the media. They're getting you ready to accept less and live a downgraded lifestyle, a squeezed in smart city, completely controlled existence, and you're supposed to embrace it and accept it. And those who don't are now ostracized or deplatformed, or, you know, if you have an alternative opinion, that's not good at this time. So now add the food in. So if all this craziness is happening because of just people, politics, thoughts, what's going to happen when it comes down to real food, where your family starves or you don't get that food? It's going to be a whole game changer at that point. So you see where we are around. It's a very soft version, very light version. Now put up the life and death struggle into that, and you're going to see something flip.
I'm going to take off on what I talked about, the movie Collapse with Michael Rupert. Also in that movie was someone that I haven't spoken about often, but I actually read not that often, but I certainly admire his thinking, and that's James Howard Kunstler. And he said for years that we're going to go to, smaller communities. As he has several books, one Something by Hand, where basically, we're going what you're outlining. You said it in a different way with the Game of Thrones, but basically it's going to be your community and what you can grow and what you can trade. And, as they say in China, the emperor is very far away. This big government it may exist in name only, because really it's going to be more of a survival mode. Would you comment on that? What your thoughts are?
I wouldn't. And when you say that, please don't think that it's going to be at the super survival mode minimalist, where it's not going to be like that. You can thrive during these changes. If you know they're coming, you can get together with other like-minded people, share and exchange skill sets, get ready for the changes, and come together as a united community to be able to still live lifestyles that we are used to today. It doesn't have to collapse. I mean, if you're unprepared, that's going to be the collapse for you. But if you're in a community that has bonded together, and it's not just going to be, two families, it could be thousands of people. but having that mindset of we need to grow our own, we need to take care of our own food sovereignty, medical sovereignty, and getting everything back into, we trade, like the concept of money might shift into, well, we don't use paper anymore. We still keep sound money, gold, silver, but then we got the digital cryptocurrencies in. I'm not really a fan of the central bank digital currencies, which are being unveiled across the planet for this new central bank digital menage, whatever it is. But, you know, real tradable, hour for hour, skill for skill, value for value. And if people can get on that sort of concept versus trading money, you could live the most bountiful existence. I mean, before the concept of money was around, what did people do? They survived and were living wonderful lives. And I think it's all about the solutions now too, is coming together with this kind of, from this point forward, we need to start thinking like this, and who else out there is also thinking like this, we can come together. And I don't know what your skill set is. Everybody has a different skill set, but in the middle there, we can find something that meshes and covers all the bases in there, from medicine to food growing to metallurgy, repair, anything. There's a million things you could think of that people have skill sets to do that you personally don't know how to do.
I've thought about medicinal herbs, you know, just getting these herbs that will heal people. And there's a whole art to that. I don't claim to know much. I bought a book on it. I haven't read it, but I know you can get seeds for a lot of these plants that are healing. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wind this down there but I want to set the scene because we need to continue this discussion. So the latest report I put out for my premium members had everything to do with the World Economic Forum. And I went through it step by step by step. What they are saying, exactly what they want to do with the artificial intelligence, is obvious they want a cashless society. Everything is tracked and everything goes through their blockchain. And they want it backed by absolutely nothing, modern money theory, where they can print as much as they want and they just control what its value is based on their artificial intelligence algorithm. So really this push towards socialism is just a stepping stone in my steady view toward a technocracy, which is where the elites are sitting there in the Game of Thrones, on the thrones, and as you said, everybody else is in a Hunger Games type of atmosphere. So that's where I'd like to go with the next interview, but I don't want to leave me with the final word. You want to make a few comments on there, and I really think we should revisit this and start moving into the technology side of where the powers that be or want to push us, and what these opportunities are where we can come together and start our own communities. So back to you.
And I'd like to get your take too. So you just laid out the full groundwork there. Now, where do you think metals fit into this with the cashless society and the digital sphere of things? I understand that you're going to have to be COVID immunity passport tracked before they'll let you into supermarkets, and your universal basic income will come in the form of central bank digital currency, which can only be spent at those venues that are into the system, where you won't be able to use that money outside of certain different places. So you'll be forced into a certain buy pattern. But where would metals sit inside this, outside of that whole completely controlled environment of track and trace, spend and track, habits and track, but then we have something that's completely off the grid called that piece of silver or gold. So where do you see that sitting in the technocracy then?
I'll tell you. I think I'll stop it there. We're going to leave that as a teaser for our next interview, because I definitely want to come.
Come on back. Come on back. We'll talk about it more.
We're off air, but I won't leave everybody hanging. I mean, what I call the free market, and most the authorities call the black market, always exists. So even if you don't have the phone that has the app, that's the only one that can work in a store, somebody in your community might, and is willing to go in there and get you something on their app, bring it out, and you give them 2 ounces of silver. I mean, this cannot be stopped. Human nature cannot be crushed. It's been tried many, many times, and there's all kinds of science fiction, dystopian movies about it, and novels. But that's the way I see it. So that's part of the answer. But I really want to go hard on the blockchain, and it's like several things in our lives. It's a thing that can be used for good, and it's a thing that can be used for bad. And, it's the way that we as humans use it, really. So if you don't mind, I just enjoyed every minute of this interview, but I think we have a lot to discuss on the blockchain technology, the AI, and how technocracy and their planned food production going forward fits into this whole picture. Is that fair?
It is, and I would encourage everybody out there to do your own research. I don't want you to listen to what I said. I want you to do your own research. And the first little nugget of breadcrumb that I might drop out there is the reason that China is so heavily invested over North Africa is they have collapsed. The Chinese emperors have collapsed on a regular period of about 400 years, and there's been no dynasty that's lasted longer than 400 years. And I would try to ask you to go out and try to disprove that statement. And by you looking back in history and seeing on these years and centuries that these collapses happen, you're going to start to see the pattern. And once you see that and you understand that it overlaps with the solar activity, a light bulb's going to go off. And that would be my statement out there is please try to do your own research and start with the easiest. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit to prove a point of it's a periodic cycle, it's provable, it's here again, governments have postured, and you're not included in the posturing to move forward. You're an expendable. And well, thanks, David, for having me on today. You can find more of my work at Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube or the Patreon channel /Adapt 2030. Go into a little bit deeper subjects that you like to talk about that I can't do on the tube because there's so much censorship, but I go into a lot deeper issues on why the COVID's here, some of the things that are going to happen with the track and trace, and just things we can't really discuss in a more open environment here due to censorship.
Great. And I will say that for my premium members, I will post a slide deck. This will obviously be a public interview, but David's given me a slide deck that's very important. I'll put it behind our membership wall so that all of our members can see it. Can hardly wait to get back to you and talk about AI and the technocracy ahead. But thank you for your time. It was really, really great.
Yeah, thanks as well. See you next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.